The morning light stretched through the cracked blinds of a small Brooklyn apartment, dust motes glimmering like memories in suspension. Clara Bennett stood before the mirror, fastening the top button of her catering uniform. Her reflection wasn't kind. Hair pinned hastily, faint circles under her hazel eyes, but her resolve was sharp as glass. Today she was covering an elite charity gala, and the paycheck meant rent and groceries for another month. Across town, Ethan Ward, the man she once called her husband, adjusted his cufflinks in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. He had everything: the company, the city's respect, the headlines. But his eyes, gray-blue and distant, carried a silence that even glass towers couldn't hide. The two worlds would meet tonight, one of polished silver, the other of chipped porcelain. Clara's co-workers joked about the golden crowd and their bottomless tips. She smiled, saying nothing, hiding the small silver ring she still kept in her apron pocket. By midnight, that secret would no longer belong to her alone. The ballroom shimmered like liquid gold. Clara moved among the guests, her tray balanced with precision, her steps rehearsed to invisibility. Every movement around her was a performance, laughter polished to perfection, conversations about art and charity that hid gossip and rivalry beneath. She caught glimpses of faces she had once seen on magazine covers, but the air here was thin, and she felt like an intruder in borrowed light. A cluster of women near the dais whispered, glancing at her with faint smiles too sharp to be kind. Margot Vale raised a glass and smirked, her words slicing softly into the music. "They'll let anyone in these days, won't they?" Laughter rippled. Clara's cheeks burned. She steadied her tray, refusing to let a single glass fall. The music swelled as Ethan took the microphone, thanking donors with practiced composure. From across the room, his gaze drifted, finding Clara's face among the servers. For a fraction of a second, time fractured. She froze, breath caught between shock and disbelief. He looked unchanged, confident, distant, but in his eyes flickered recognition and regret. The crowd applauded. Clara turned sharply away, pretending to refill glasses, but her hand trembled so violently that a drop of champagne fell onto her wrist like a tear she couldn't hide. Margot's laughter rose again, louder this time, laced with venom. "Careful with that tray, sweetheart," she said, as Clara passed. "Those glasses cost more than your paycheck." A few guests chuckled. Clara forced a polite nod, her throat tight. Then, from behind her, another voice joined the mockery. A young man's drunken slur about waitresses who think they belong. The laughter that followed felt like a wave breaking over her. She stood still, tray shaking in her grip, until the room seemed to blur. And then Ethan's chair scraped against marble. Ethan's voice cut through the noise like glass. "That's enough." The laughter fell silent. Every head turned. Margot's painted smile froze mid-curve. Ethan's gaze locked on Clara, steady and unflinching. "You all seem to have forgotten your manners," he said, stepping closer, his tone calm but sharp with authority. "And perhaps I should remind you who she is." The silence thickened, guests exchanging confused glances. Clara stood paralyzed, heart pounding. Ethan drew a breath that seemed to steady the world before saying, "She's my wife." The chandelier light caught the silver band on his finger, and the room gasped as one. The ballroom froze under the chandelier's light. The silence that followed Ethan's words was thick enough to taste disbelief, envy, and shame, woven into every held breath. Clara felt the world tilt beneath her as faces blurred into a storm of whispers. "His wife?" someone hissed. "Impossible." Margot Vale recovered first, her polished smile curdling. "Well?" she murmured. "That's unexpected." Clara couldn't move, her pulse roared in her ears. Ethan approached slowly, his expression steady, but his eyes heavy with something unspoken. Apology, perhaps, or regret, long overdue. He reached her, close enough that she could smell the faint cologne she once knew by heart. "Clara," he said softly. Please, come with me. The tray slipped from her trembling hands, glasses shattering across the marble floor. They walked out together under the glittering canopy of the hotel's entrance, flashes from cameras already blooming like fireworks. A wave of murmurs followed them, reporters shouting questions, guests whispering in disbelief. Clara wrapped her arms around herself as if to disappear. Ethan's hand rested gently at her back, guiding her into a waiting car. Inside, the air was tense and fragile. You shouldn't have done that, she said, voice low, almost breaking. He turned to her, his jaw tightening. I wasn't going to let them humiliate you. You already did, she whispered. The city lights streaked across her face, revealing tears she couldn't hide. Ethan looked away, regret twisting through his composure. Clara, he said quietly, I had to tell them. I couldn't hide you anymore. Hours earlier, before the gala, before the humiliation, Clara had stood in a quiet chapel on 32nd Street. The memory came like a sudden heartbeat, uninvited but clear. A year ago, she and Ethan had stood there too, both trembling as they said vows under the soft glow of stained glass. She had worn a pale blue dress, simple and sweet, her auburn hair falling over her shoulders. We'll tell them soon, he'd promised, holding her hands. When the time is right. But the right time never came. He'd returned to his world, and she to hers, a secret love hidden behind boardroom doors and gala walls. Now, as she remembered his smile in that chapel light, her heart ached with the cruel irony that it took public shame for him to finally call her his wife. The car stopped outside Ethan's penthouse tower. Clara hesitated before stepping out, her reflection fractured in the mirrored doors. Inside, the silence was heavy, thick with the echoes of a marriage built on secrecy. She followed him through marble halls lined with art she'd once helped him choose, back when laughter and ambition had meant something pure. You married me in secret, she said finally, voice trembling but firm. Then you left me in silence. Ethan stopped, turning slowly. You think it was easy? He asked. You think I didn't fight them? You didn't fight hard enough, she replied. Her voice cracked, but her spine stayed straight. The man who once promised her forever stood before her, now as a stranger dressed in remorse. The night stretched deep. Ethan leaned against the window, his reflection a ghost beside the glittering skyline. I thought keeping us private would protect you, he said quietly. Clara sat on the edge of the sofa, her eyes red but unbroken. You protected yourself, she answered. You were afraid of what they'd say, afraid your world wouldn't accept someone like me. He turned toward her, the weight of truth in his gaze. I was wrong, he admitted. And now? She asked. Now, he said, stepping closer. They know who you are. They can laugh all they want. You're still my wife. She met his eyes, no longer in awe, but in defiance, and whispered, Then start acting like it. By morning, the city had devoured the story. Headlines screamed, Billionaire's secret marriage to waitress revealed at gala. Clara sat in her small apartment, her phone buzzing relentlessly. Journalists, old cowworkers, even strangers with opinions disguised as advice. She scrolled through comments, each one another blade. Gold digger. Publicity stunt. Poor girl, what did she think would happen? The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Her catering uniform hung over a chair, still smelling faintly of champagne and shame. Across the river, Ethan faced a boardroom full of furious investors. You've jeopardized the company's reputation, one said. Ethan didn't flinch. I protected my wife, he answered. But as the room erupted in murmurs, even he could feel the truth. His power came with a price he'd only begun to pay. Ethan's office tower loomed above Manhattan like a monument to power. Glass, steel, and secrets. Inside, the tension was electric. A dozen executives circled the table, their voices sharp. Married to a waitress? You've destroyed our image. Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped. Our image is built on innovation, not gossip. A gray-haired board member sneered. Investors don't care about innovation when you were the headline. Ethan's eyes hardened, then let them sell. The silence that followed was as thick as smoke. Beneath his composed exterior, guilt gnawed, not for the company, but for how long he'd let fear dictate his heart. Outside, lightning split the clouds over the city, mirroring the fracture now running through his empire. By afternoon, Clara found herself surrounded by flashing cameras. She had tried to slip quietly into a corner cafe near her apartment, but the world had followed her there. Mrs. Ward, is it true you met him while waiting tables? Were you paid to keep it secret? The questions came like bullets. She froze, clutching her coffee cup until her knuckles turned white. A young barista tried to help. Ma'am, maybe you should step inside. Clara nodded gratefully, slipping into the cafe's back room. For a moment, she leaned against the wall, breathing hard, the smell of espresso grounding her. She remembered their wedding day again, the promises of privacy and protection, and realized how fragile those vows had become under the weight of the world. Inside the cafe, away from the chaos, Clara sat with trembling hands wrapped around a cup. A woman approached, mid-30s, kind-eyed, holding a folded newspaper. You don't know me, she said, but I wanted to tell you I believe you. Clara blinked, taken aback. You don't even know what to believe. The woman smiled softly. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to be laughed at by people who think they're better. For the first time that day, Clara felt something other than fear. A flicker of warmth, humanity. She whispered. Thank you, she whispered. When the woman left, Clara opened the newspaper she'd left behind. Ethan's photograph filled the page, serious, composed, unreachable. And beneath it, the caption, Love or Lie? Clara closed her eyes. Somewhere between those words, her heart began to harden. That night, Clara returned to the penthouse. She stood at the door for a long moment before knocking, the city humming below. Ethan opened the door, his expression caught between relief and guilt. You shouldn't have come, he said softly. Neither should you have married me, she replied, her tone steady. He stepped aside, letting her in. Clara, I'm trying to fix this. You can't fix something by controlling it, she said. You told them because you wanted to save face, not me. He looked wounded but didn't deny it. Silence stretched, heavy and fine. Then she whispered, If this is love, Ethan, maybe I don't want to be saved. Her words lingered as she turned away, her reflection fading into the city lights beyond the glass. Morning light spilled across headlines scattered on Ethan's desk. Ward Global faces internal uprising after secret marriage scandal. He hadn't slept. His reflection in the glass wall looked older, sharper, like a man half ruined by his own silence. A knock at the door. Margot Vale entered, heels clicking like a countdown. You've made quite the mess, she said, voice dripping amusement. Ethan didn't look up. What do you want, Margot? To offer a solution? She purred, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside, a financial deal, one that would stabilize his collapsing stock value. In exchange? He asked. She smiled. A clean divorce. The board needs reassurance. He stared at her, his silence an unspoken war. You underestimate her, he finally said. No, Margot replied, turning toward the door. I understand her perfectly. She doesn't belong here. Clara stood outside a quiet cafe downtown, the one she and Ethan had visited before their marriage. The memory felt almost unreal now. As she waited for her coffee, a stranger approached. A man in his 40s, expensive suit, the kind of smile that hit a motive. Mrs. Ward, he greeted, offering his card. Darren Holt, I represent some Interested parties. She frowned. Interested in what? In helping you, he said smoothly. Ethan's reputation is tanking. If you walk away, quietly, you could secure your future. Financially speaking. She stared at him, the words landing like poison disguised as kindness. You think I married him for money? No, he replied. But you could leave him for it. She turned away, disgust sharpening her tone. Tell your interested parties I don't sell my name. Then she dropped the card into a trash bin and walked into the wind. In the office, Ethan's phone rang again, the 6th call in an hour. He ignored it, staring instead at the folder Margot had left. Divorce, control, image. Words that meant survival in business and death in love. Henry Ward entered quietly, his cane tapping softly against the marble floor. You're losing yourself, son, he said. Ethan rubbed his eyes. I'm losing everything. His father stepped closer. Not everything. Not if you remember why you started all this. Ethan looked up, weary. For the company, Henry's voice deepened, kind but firm. No, Ethan. For her. You wanted to build a world where she'd never be looked down upon. Don't let fear build another cage instead. The truth cut deep. Ethan leaned back, realizing that power meant nothing if love became collateral. That evening, Clara returned to her apartment to find an envelope slipped beneath her door. Inside, photographs. Grainy shots of her and Ethan at their secret wedding, followed by one more recent. Her leaving the penthouse. A note in neat handwriting. You deserve better. Take the offer. She sat on the couch staring at them, her heart beat loud in her chest. The city lights outside her window blurred as tears filled her eyes, not from sadness but anger. She had been humiliated, offered money, now blackmailed. She rose slowly, her resolve like steel. They think I'll walk away, she whispered to herself. They still don't know me. The camera's flash might have captured her pain once, but not anymore. The next morning, the Ward Foundation board convened for an emergency session. Margot sat at the center, every movement calculated. When the doors opened, murmurs swept through the room. Clara entered beside Ethan, poised and silent. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, her hair tied back neatly. Mrs. Ward, Margot said sweetly, we weren't expecting. I'm not here for your expectations, Clara interrupted. Her voice was calm, clear. I'm here for the truth. She placed the photographs on the table. Someone in this room sent these to me. Whoever it was, they should know. I won't be silenced. Not by gossip, not by money, not by fear. For a long, stunned moment, no one spoke. Then Henry smiled quietly from his seat at the back. Ethan looked at his wife and saw the woman who could bring his empire back to life. By dawn, the world had chosen its villain. Clara woke to the sound of her phone vibrating violently against the nightstand. Her breath caught when she saw the screen, her private wedding photos, leaked online. Every site had them, every caption cruel. Waitress weds tycoon in secret. Manipulation or romance. One picture showed her laughing, mid-vow. Another, kissing Ethan beneath the stained glass light. What had once been sacred now felt stolen. Her phone buzzed again, Ethan calling. She silenced it. Then again. She stared at the ring on her hand, her pulse trembling. Not like this, she whispered. Not again. Outside her window, the morning city roared, indifferent, hungry, alive with other people's pain. At Ward Global Headquarters, chaos reigned. The boardroom hummed with crisis control, and Ethan stood at the center, a man under siege. Damage control? Someone shouted. You've humiliated this company. Margot sat smugly at the end of the table, her expression one of well-practiced sympathy. Ethan's voice stayed low. Find out who leaked those photos. You think it matters now? Margot replied. It's too late. His glare turned sharp. Nothing's too late. When she smiled, just a fraction too wide, he knew. The pieces fell together. She had done it. You wanted her destroyed, he said quietly. You just destroyed yourself instead. Margot's smirk faltered. You have no proof. Ethan's tone turned cold. Then I'll find it. Clara left her apartment that afternoon, her hood pulled low, the city alive with whispers. Every cafe, every headline, every idle phone screen seemed to carry her face. At the corner of and Madison, she stopped in front of a billboard, Ethan's company logo beside her photo, blown up without mercy. Her chest tightened. She stepped into a nearby park where autumn leaves drifted across the paths. Sitting on a bench, she pulled out her phone and finally answered his call. "Clara, don't," she interrupted. "You said you'd protect me, but I'm drowning, Ethan." His voice cracked. "I can fix this." "Stop trying to fix me," she said softly. "Start listening." The line went quiet, the sound of wind and traffic filling the spaces where love once lived. That night, Ethan arrived at her apartment unannounced. She opened the door to find him soaked from rain, exhaustion etched into his features. "You shouldn't be here," she said. But he stepped inside anyway. "I know who leaked them," he said. "Margot, I can prove it." Clara turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "So what? You'll destroy her? That's your answer to everything. Destroy or control?" He froze. "I'm trying to defend you." "No, you're trying to erase the consequences of your silence." Her words landed like thunder. "You hid me, Ethan. Then you exposed me. And now you want to fix. When do I get to just be me?" He stepped closer, desperate, rain still dripping from his hair. "I love you." She looked up, her eyes shimmering with sorrow. "Then let me go." The next morning, Clara walked into Ward Global's lobby one last time. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed her like shadows. She carried no bag, no jewelry, just a sealed envelope. Ethan met her halfway, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. "What is that?" he asked. "The last thing I owe you," she said. Inside her letter of separation, no lawyers, no threats, just her handwriting. "You once said you built this world for me, but I never asked for it. I only ever wanted you." She handed it to him gently, then turned away. The marble floor reflected her as she walked, small, graceful, unbroken. Behind her, Ethan stood frozen, the letter trembling in his hands, as the empire he'd built suddenly felt like a cage collapsing inward. Ethan hadn't left his office in 2 days. The city pulsed beyond the glass, but inside, time stood still. He sat in silence. Her letter open on his desk, the words etched into him like scripture. "I never asked for your world." Every syllable cut deeper than betrayal ever could. Henry, 63, entered quietly. "You look like your mother when you've lost a fight. You were meant to win," he said. Ethan gave a hollow laugh. "I've lost more than that." Henry placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then earn it back. But not with money, with truth." Ethan turned to him, weary but resolute. "I know what I have to do." Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm before the reckoning. Whoa! Morning broke over Manhattan with headlines shifting again. Ward Global announces emergency press conference. Margot stood in her office, fuming. Her carefully built web was unraveling. Ethan's assistant had called her hours earlier, summoning her to the boardroom. She arrived with her usual confidence, but the mood was different this time. Colder. Deliberate. Ethan waited by the window, flanked by lawyers and the board. "You leaked the photos," he said. "Don't bother denying it." Margot smiled faintly. "You have no proof." Ethan pressed a button on the table. A recording played. Her voice, clear as glass, saying, "Shall be gone before the quarter ends." Silence fell. Margot's face drained of color. "You set me up," she hissed. Ethan's gaze was steady. "No, you set yourself up." For once, Margot had no reply. By noon, the press had gathered like vultures beneath Ward Global's headquarters. Cameras pointed upward as Ethan stepped to the podium, sleeves rolled, voice raw. "The truth," he began, "is that I let fear dictate who I was allowed to love." The crowd fell silent. "Clara Bennett is my wife. She didn't marry my money. She married the man I used to be. Before I hid behind this empire, every lie, every silence, every rumor began with me. Gasps and shudders filled the air. But this ends today. Our company stands for building foundations. It's time I built mine again, honestly." His voice wavered, but his resolve did not. For the first time in years, Ethan Ward wasn't performing. He was confessing, and the world was finally listening. Clara watched the live broadcast from her apartment, her heart an orchestra of disbelief and quiet ache. The man on the screen, stripped of armor, trembling but honest, was not the Ethan she had known. He wasn't the billionaire or the strategist. He was the man from the chapel, the one who had held her hand under colored glass and promised the world would never touch them. Tears welled as his final words echoed, "Love doesn't need an audience to be real." She turned off the TV, the silence almost sacred. Then she picked up her sketchbook, blank for months, and began to draw. Not him, not them, but a building. Something new, something hers. Later that evening, the world exhaled. Margot resigned publicly, her empire of gossip collapsing in on itself. Investors returned cautiously, but Ethan didn't celebrate. Instead, he drove to the one place where it had all begun, the small chapel on 32nd Street. He entered quietly, the same wooden pews, the same faint scent of lilies. Clara was already there, sketchbook on her lap, as if she'd known. "You kept coming back here," he said softly. "It's the only place that still feels real," she replied. He sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "I can't ask for forgiveness," he said. "Then don't," she whispered. "Just keep being honest." Outside, rain began to fall, steady and cleansing, as if the city itself had chosen to start again. 3 months later, winter melted into a hesitant spring. Clara walked through the newly restored community center in Harlem. Her first architectural design brought to life. Children's laughter filled the air, echoing through clean halls painted in sunrise colors. The building stood as a promise, built with Ward Foundation funding, but carrying her name, the Bennett Center for Youth Design. Reporters had come, but she kept her speech short. "This is for anyone who was told they didn't belong in the room," she said, her voice steady. "You do." Applause filled the hall, but Clara's eyes searched the back quietly. She wasn't sure if he'd come. She hoped he hadn't. She hoped he had. When she stepped outside into the cold sunlight, she saw him waiting by the gate. Older somehow, humbler, smiling softly. "Didn't think you'd show," she said when he approached, her breath forming soft clouds in the early spring chill. "Didn't think I'd be welcome," Ethan replied. His voice was gentle, stripped of its former command. "You built something beautiful, Clara." She smiled faintly. "So did you when you stopped trying to own it." For a moment, they stood in quiet, the past hovering between them like fog. "I came to ask," he began, "not for another chance, but for the chance to help." She studied him, the humility in his eyes, the way he didn't reach for her hand this time. "Then start by listening," she said. "We build this next thing my way. Your way," he repeated softly, and for the first time, she believed him. Weeks passed. The press found new stories to chase, and the world forgot their scandal. But Clara and Ethan didn't need forgetting. They needed understanding. Together, they began visiting design schools and youth shelters, not as a billionaire and his wife, but as partners. He spoke about risk. She spoke about resilience. Sometimes they arrived together, sometimes apart, but the cause became their bridge. One evening, as they packed art supplies after an event, Ethan turned to her. "You once told me you never wanted my world," he said. "That's still true," she replied, smiling. "But I don't mind visiting now and then." Their laughter filled the empty hall. Soft, familiar, free of ghosts. One rainy evening, Clara found herself alone in the chapel once more. She lit a single candle and sat in the same pew where they had once promised forever. The stained glass light shimmered across her face. She whispered a prayer, not for love, but for peace. When she rose to leave, she saw Ethan standing at the doorway, umbrella in hand. "Still chasing storms?" she asked softly. He smiled. "Not anymore. I think I've found shelter." They didn't speak again. But as they walked outside beneath one umbrella, the silence said everything. The rain fell gently, not like sorrow this time, but like forgiveness. Months later, the city celebrated the launch of the Clara Bennett Fellowship for Design and Ethics, funded anonymously, though everyone knew. On stage, she spoke without fear, grace steady in her voice. "They laughed once," she said, pausing to meet the audience's eyes. "But laughter fades. What remains is what you build after it stops." Applause rose like thunder. In the crowd, Ethan clapped quietly, proud, unseen. When she left the stage, she looked toward the back of the room. He was gone. But that was all right. Some love doesn't need witness, only respect. Outside, night fell gently over the city. Not an ending, but a beginning made of truth.